God's like, hey, you'll freaking pick something. I'll bless it, bro. I just need you to get your stuff in order. I'm not here to babysit you and micromanage you. You complain about your boss micromanaging you all day and you're asking me to micromanage your life. Like, bro, I'll bless it. Just get going.
Swebb returns to the podcast. It's good to have you back, my friend.
Thanks, sir. I love how all that sounded right there.
Oh, yeah. It sounded exactly the way it should have sounded.
Dun.
All right. You said something recently on your Substack, which I highly recommend, by the way, but we'll get to that. You were talking about the downside of staying planted. And I want to hear more about that because I've been somebody who has advocated over the years, taught people that there's fruit when you stay planted. What is the downside of that?
Man, well, okay, there's context there though. I'll try not to ramble, but I'll just say that staying planted by itself, I guess, is fine, except sometimes we eat that cliche and we think that the cliche is the sustainable part. It's the sustenance or something that we need. And that's my problem. It's like after fruit is no longer being produced, we keep saying the cliche of stay planted, stay rooted. And at some point it's like, well, hang on a second. Like, I think at some point all metaphors break down. I think they all preach really good in the short term, but at some point going down with the ship is another metaphor, for example, that sounds really good until you're actually on a sinking ship. It's like, I don't know if this is the win. I don't think this is what really helps humanity for me to just kind of check out. So I'm more anti-cliche than don't stay planted. Because as you know, I mean, I stayed at a church for 10 years. I stayed at my dad's church, and I'm staying on staff, obviously. I stayed on staff at my dad's church for, I think, 7 years. So like extended periods of time past hard seasons, which is super relative. So I do like the idea of staying planted, but the downside is that you munch on that cliche instead of, see the fruit that cliche is supposed to, imply. And that's my bigger problem.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things you're so good at is dismantling cliches.
Yeah.
Like finding the heart of what is good in it, but so often people don't even know why they're saying the cliche or what it even means or where it began.
Right.
And so that whole staying planted thing was, you were talking, you called it Quit Week on Substack. And I really want to dive into more of that because I think one of the things that, in our friendship over the last 4 years or so, we've talked a lot about graduating.
Yeah.
And I want to know the difference in your mind between quitting, resigning, and graduating. Because I remember when I first told you that I'd resigned from Elevation 3 years ago, you're like, no, you didn't resign, you graduated. So talk about that.
Yeah, well, quitting is the obvious easy thing that everybody knows. Like, I quit. It's too hard. I'm frustrated. I'm not getting the praise I deserve or the paycheck I need or whatever. And it's just to me, it's negative. You would hopefully teach your sons and daughters, hey, don't be a quitter. My son's football team right now, they won the Super Bowl last season as a flag football team. And for context for everybody, my son's in 4th grade. And so they were relatively dominant last year. Well, when you do that, you have to now move up to the next league, the next level up. And they haven't won a game and they're getting destroyed by like 40 or 50 points. So naturally it puts into this, my son is like, I just want to quit. Football's not fun anymore. I'm like, whoa. It's been 3 games. And if you don't win a game the rest of the season, that's fine, but we're not quitting. We're going to finish the season. And so you see how quitting is more like this, like, again, hopefully you're trying to coach that out of your kids and then obviously your team members and other people. But to me, that's quitting. It's super negative. It's like, you just kind of throw your hands in the air like, this is stupid. So graduating is the other end of that spectrum, of course, which is, man, it'd be weird to be 22 years old and still in high school. At some point it's like, hey, you've finished, like we can go home now. Like we can go to the next thing now. And we talk more about graduation. Resigning to me is just kind of a middle ground. It goes both ways, like it's funny, even in the graduation conversation, I still teach people how to write a resignation letter. It's just more the official LinkedIn title, I guess, of the word of the process. But even then, to me, it always just kind of sounded like, okay, I feel like I could still do more, but I'm 50 years old now. I resign. So to me, it still feels a little bit, I don't know. It feels like you're not running through the finish line, but you kind of did enough to move on. So hopefully that provides a little bit. Like, so quitting is super negative. Resigning is kind of in the middle. Like, it's fine, bro. You can move on. Graduating is like, man, I'm still like top of my game, just moving to the next level. And so I would prefer everybody in any industry graduate. Now, I'm not telling you have to move on. I'm saying finish whatever that is. And before that, of course, you have to define what finish means. And that's more what I like to do. So, of course, when I'm telling you that a few years ago, you'd clearly built something substantial. You clearly developed people and built people. And we can define that. We can quantify that. We can put names to that. So you had achieved things and finished. And so now it's okay, you know what? Now I have to do the next thing. Then I have to bounce from this. And so that's why I was eager. And that's why it was easy to quit to graduate in your case and a lot of people's cases for that matter.
Yeah. The thing I like about the graduation term is it implies that an assignment has been completed.
Right.
And that you're actually moving on to the next phase. Mm-hmm. And it's not diminishing what you're leaving behind. It's more of saying, no, the part that I was supposed to play is done, and I'm not overstaying my welcome.
That's right.
And it's kind of funny because, you and I talk almost every day. My kids were joking around that they hear your voice through voice memos almost as much as they hear mine.
Oh, that's good.
And one of the things that I know so many people come to you trying to be coached on how to graduate well.
Yeah.
Or they'll come to you with the question, how do you know when it's time? Mm-hmm. And I think the reason I wanted to really talk about this in this episode is I feel like I had a conversation with someone yesterday that they were like, man, I'm miserable where I'm at, but I don't think it's time to leave.
Right.
And I get that. And it might not be time to leave. Mm-hmm. But how do you know when it is? How do you know when it's, I need to push through this? Because you've pushed through some difficult seasons.
Yeah.
And those were important seasons for you to push through. You still had work to do. There was still work that had to be done in you. Mm-hmm. And there were seasons where I had to push through. I remember there was a time in 2016 where I was like, oh gosh, a lot of people were leaving. Mm-hmm. A lot of my really close friends were leaving on staff. Mm-hmm. I wasn't in a great place.
Right.
And I remember I'm not going to say like the heavens parted, but I had a very clear moment where I felt like the Lord said, no, you are supposed to still be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was there I was at Elevation for another 4 years. And I believe if I left in 2016, I would have left with a lot of just baggage that I would have carried with me into whatever the next thing was. And I would have left things in a not good place. So I wouldn't have done my job as a leader. But I was able to leave in 2021 in a much healthier place.
Yeah.
So all that to say, how do you coach people through figuring that out?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I have a similar story. 2016 must have been I don't remember all the details, but if you and I both had a rough year that year, I know what mine was, but it doesn't relate to yours. So anyway, fun time. So, to me, it's a conversation. So it's good to stay up front. Like, I don't think this is a burning bush thing. I don't think there's a formula. If you ask these 3 questions, you're going to get an 89% certainty rate of it's time to move. That's where, again, the metaphor of graduating high school, for example, that's where that breaks down. You kind of have a due date out there. You know that the middle of May, you take your final exams or whatever, and you're out. I know that doesn't exist generally in any other kind of role or industry or whatnot. So I'm not saying that it's easy, but I am saying that it's a little more simple than we think. Because at the end of the day, if I cut to the end and go all the way to the end here, I feel like, and I'll kind of back into, how I talk through it, but I just think people know, and they just don't want to make the decision. They don't want to communicate a decision. I feel like the Holy Spirit's usually pretty clear with people about a lot of stuff. And I feel like a good indication that the Holy Spirit's been clear is when you start increasing the amount of people you need to get advice from. It's one thing if it's like, let me call my friend Wade. And if Wade says something, so at my age, and also I have a personality, it's like pretty good. I mean, I take advice. If Wade says this, I'm like, oh, good. I don't need 7 other people to like line that thing up, but I understand people do. So I kind of take advice, but I feel like once you start adding to that list and it's like you're getting 5, 6, 7 people. Well, hang on. I haven't asked a guy who's 43. I haven't asked a person that has a prime number of children. I haven't asked somebody that's south of the Mason-Dixon line. I probably ought to, we start doing that. To me, that's just a massive flag. Like, hey, bro, you already know. And I would argue that of the people I've talked to, now we're over 100 people now, by the way, of people I've helped graduate from their church positions at lots of layers. Lead pastors, for example. I'm saying that the vast majority of them knew, and they were just slow to make a decision because there is a weight to that. You're like, what am I gonna do? Like a lot of it's the income side of things. Some of it is a sort of a pride thing. Like, I feel like people are going to view this as quitting. I have a good team that relies on me. These are valid concerns, but the point is, but and so all that to say, I think a lot of my conversations are actually more confidence building, encouragement conversation, not a clarity conversation for the most part. And if I do have to dive in pretty hard to a clarity side of like, well, is God telling you this? Or how would you know? Have you seen the scenario? If I have to do that, I'm actually, funny enough, pretty patient on helping people. Hey, man, this might not be it. Take a few more months, take a few more years for all I care. So again, that's a distinguished. That's something I'd like to distinguish is that, again, most of my conversations, I just help them see they've already come to that point.
Yeah.
And I'm going to save you a whole lot of hassle and bitterness and frustration, drop income in the future, premature quittings in the future by making a decision that you already know to make right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think too, some of it is looking at someone's patterns and saying, okay, are you the type of person who runs when things get hard?
Right.
Are you in your early 20s and this is your first job and you've never encountered things getting difficult at a job?
Yep.
Or do you have a pattern of staying someplace for a very long time, serving through difficult seasons? And if that's your pattern and you're a committed person and you're still wrestling with these feelings of maybe God is calling me to something else or urging me to move on, then to me, that's a different conversation because you have a pattern of faithfulness and a pattern of consistency.
That's right. Yeah, that's a great way to talk about it. So I do like to ask those patterns, like, because I feel like it usually starts with a frustration. Somebody's mad about something. Hey, man, and I get DMs all the time about this, even just yesterday too. Hey, I feel like this, and this has happened. So I'd like to talk to you. It's like, why do you need a negative trigger to make you move on? But I understand. But then it's just reliving that pattern. Okay, is this the first time that's happened? Is this the first time you felt that way? Where did you come from before this church? And so I do think that's a great example. And to me, that's just, well, you know how they say, like, if it's easy to you, it's hard to teach. If it's intuitive to you, it's hard to teach. So putting into formula what you're asking is hard for me to do right now. But from a pattern standpoint, I do think it's a lot of just reliving history and literally writing it down. What's the last 3 jobs you moved on from, quit from, whatever? What's the last 3 things that frustrated you at this particular church or role? What's the last 3 conversations you had with your wife about this church? That's a really key indicator. A lot of our friends, that's usually where I start. It's like, I see your wife post this, but you're over here like, but God is good and I'm staying planted. I was like, that's not what your wife is saying. And so you can kind of see that pattern too, and so that's just part of that. Like, hey, I'll be the guy to pull the Band-Aid off and expose something because you have a pattern of negativity or a pattern of shallow, kind of hollow praise, if you will, or positivity on your social media, or you have this pattern of posting more about your side hustle than your main hustle. So that's a good point. You can see patterns on so many different levels.
The side hustle versus the main hustle. That's the big one right now. A very real one.
Yeah, that's a real big one right now. So, and it's a big deal because it's a cultural violation, is the phrase we used to use, right? Where I remember, frankly, the good old days where it was frowned upon to have a side hustle because we're driven in this thing. And so, now, with everybody able to do a podcast or everybody's a life coach these days. It's amazing. If you work at a big church, you automatically know how to give advice to everybody as if it's not a skill or a calling or something. So, But now it's like everybody can have a side hustle, and that's okay. I actually don't have a problem with that. But it's real easy just to audit numerically, just with math. Just go through your social media, and it's 5 posts for the side hustle, 1 post for the main hustle. It's true in other industries. It's not just a church thing. It's definitely not just an elevation thing or something like that. It's just that's an easy one these days for me, because that's what blows up your feed. It's nowadays where my wife and I, she's like, "Hey, did so and so graduate from such and such church?" I was like, "I don't know. I haven't heard. Why?" Well, because they're posting this, this, and this. and I'm like, "See, it's clear. Everybody sees it." And I was like, "Nope. Turns out they're still there, but their whole life has changed, and now we just know they have done a quit and stay. They're sucking in a paycheck. That's the reason they're there."
Well, I think the quit and stay is an important thing to talk about too, because sometimes we think we're honoring when we stay, yet we're being dishonoring because our heart has left a long time ago.
Yeah.
How often are you seeing that play out, and what are the negative ramifications of that?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I threw a number out there. It's at least half, at least 50% of them are the quit and stays. Because it sounds noble. It's like, well, listen, I'm just so good at my job now that I can just be half present. I've never heard anybody say that, but it kind of comes across that way. And so I feel like it's pretty often you've seen quit and stays. They should have graduated before. Some people have actually done this before, by the way, and they've missed good opportunities. And once they do graduate, they kind of call the guy back. "Hey, remember last year you were trying to offer me this job? Nope, that's done. It's filled. Opportunity of a lifetime. It's got to be seized in a lifetime of the opportunity." It's an amazing line, amazing cliche that holds true. So I'd say about 50% of the time I see that. But I feel like the ramifications can go, all over the place. The kind of the slightly more positive ones are you're keeping a space for somebody else who could step into their calling in a maybe more, vocal or present or, kind of forward facing way. Think about like a campus pastor role. There's somebody else who could do that job better, is really called to do that job, because you're called to graduate and move to the next thing, but you're still staying there for whatever reason. So it'd be an example of, man, you're holding everybody else back. You're the lid on so many other levels there. Could be that. The ramifications, of course, on the personal side, because there's a list of probably 100, obviously. But on the back end side, it's amazing how a quit and stay actually robs you of tremendous things in the future. Something you and I've talked about before is, I know that we're not in it for the money. I'm not in ministry for the money. I stayed at ministry for a long time for far less money. So it's not that. But it's funny how many people will worry about, oh, what's next? I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm like, man, if you only knew that you could make your annual salary in about 3 months as soon as you move on from this. That's not true for everybody, by the way, but some people I have in mind. And again, you and I've had this conversation. There's people that, man, if you only knew. So to me, that's another one, is there's this greater future out there. Now, again, I'm not saying greater is always money, but there's something else out there, but you kind of have to move on to it, So to me, that's a massive ramification. And then the other one that sticks out to me most is just that negative sort of bitter is kind of a really, maybe getting to be an overused word these days, but it's that it comes off of you where now everybody just knows that you're kind of mailing it in. Everybody can hear how your language has just kind of gotten to like, flippant. I don't care. Used to like storm hell with the water pistol. Now it's like, hey man, just, it's cool, bro. We'll check you next week. Like, that's not what we used to say. And I feel like that's the biggest one. It's a slow leak. It's a slow poisoning, if you will, the atmosphere around you, where people are like, oh, apparently this is okay for us to just be lax. And then you blink and, a year later, the whole culture is half of what it used to be. And it's one of those things it's like that frog in the boiling pot sort of thing. You don't know it, when you're in it. You need somebody like me from the outside of the frame to point it out. But a year later, everybody knows it. And that's a huge one that I feel like I see all the time.
Yeah. I was thinking through too how we can have this conversation, and a lot of times it can be interpreted, like you've said, of it's spurred on by the negative, or it's spurred on by the things you don't like, or the frustrations you have. Mm-hmm. But you and I both know this, like we both graduated into different seasons, yet we've had so many conversations between the two of us of things are hard in what we do. Yep. I mean, there's a whole different set of challenges. There's a whole different set of uncertainties. Mm-hmm. And so you have to understand that wherever you go, there's going to be a new level of hard. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a new set of difficulties. Mm-hmm. So I think this whole conversation is not framed from running from something that's hard.
Right.
It's knowing why you're doing what you're doing, it's having a clarity of purpose and focus and direction. And I think when you lose that, then you lose your ability to handle the hard things.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those slow,
Yeah.
just progressions and a kind of dilution of purpose, a dilution of focus. And so as you were talking through how people just kind of quit and stay, and the times where my mind was elsewhere and my heart was elsewhere,
Yeah.
I think that's when it gets really tough, when you lose that sense of this is why I'm here. And no matter if it's hard, I'm in it.
Yeah.
When that goes, it's a matter of time.
Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. It's funny. That's also why hard is not always the indication of like, it's time to graduate and move on. Because man, I'm sorry, that implies you've now put this seed in you that says, oh, now the next thing will be easier. I don't know, man. So I'll say the taboo thing. I can now make 3, 4, 5 times my salary just 4 years ago. The difference is I don't have guaranteed income tomorrow. Like, I'm not on salary. I just posted this morning, 3 most addicting things are heroin, carbohydrates, and a salary. And I agree with at least 2 of those. I don't know what heroin's like, but I can absolutely agree with 2 of them. And so, see, that's a different level of hard. Some people really need to know where their money's coming from. And I need to know, man, I need to know that I'm doing something substantial that's hard. My need and somebody else's need are different. So there's always going to be another hard. So I'm glad you said that. I think another thing that makes this kind of fascinating in our line of work, if you will, the church industry, is we're just better at making up words to kind of blur lines of how to quantify things or qualify stuff, whatever. I think that's what we can always just say, well, God, close the door, open the door. Like, what does that even mean? It's not a literal door, so we're not driven by metrics. Hey man, stock price is down 22%. It's time for your department to move on. Hey, we're not selling this car anymore. Nobody's renting this car. Like Hertz just decided to sell all Teslas. Why? Because it's a black and white number. This rental is not happening this way. We're going to get. So in church world, we don't necessarily have that. I'd argue you can. I help churches do that. But so I think that's actually what makes this a little harder. So we don't view what we do as a sort of a progression. So like, I'm a pilot, or was. I'd like to get back into flying when somebody else is paying for it, for sure. But like, think about that. Like, what's the point? Like we say the word purpose, for example. Well, when you start flying an airplane, you have a purpose of, I'm going to get my pilot's license. What's that mean? I'm going to be a private pilot. And then you got to change we're still flying airplanes. We're still learning things, but we have to go through that first phase. After that, the next phase is, well, now I'm going to be a commercial pilot, which means I can be paid to fly. Or I can be an instrument rated pilot, meaning I can fly in the clouds. Not everybody's allowed to do that, for example. And commercial doesn't mean airlines. It just means you can be paid to fly. So, okay, so I got to the next phase. So I go from hard to hard to hard. Sure, freedom in this case changes. I can fly this. Now I can fly higher. Ooh, now I can fly in the clouds. Ooh, now I can be paid. There's these different levels. And so that's a natural progression that I understand, having done, aviation training or whatnot for years. You see this in football. I'm a high school, and I go to college, and I go to NFL, and I have this progression. I'm going to move along in these pathways. I think so. I have some friends that were here just yesterday, and they have a bodybuilding past, and so there's these progressions you got to move through. And in church, it's just like I serve God. The end. Like, what does that even mean? And so, I feel like there's just this ambiguity that comes with what we do. I think if we read scripture and apply scripture, we can come up with these different progressions and see some clarity of how God's moving us. I think if you go back and look at the life of Moses, Joseph, a bunch of people, I think the Old Testament has a lot more clarity in that, just some of those historical stories. But I think we can. I just don't think we do. I think it's just a lot easier to say, man, I just love people. God just call me here, open door, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like a lot of the graduation conversations would be easier and, or be a non-issue, meaning you know before you even start what your next thing is. If we could just quantify a little bit more, what the heck do we mean by purpose? Where are we going on this journey? On some level, we want God to tell us stuff. And I feel like God's screaming more in this direction than we are in that direction. God's like, hey, if you'll freaking pick something, I'll bless it, bro. I just need you to get your stuff in order. I'm not here to babysit you and micromanage you. You complain about your boss micromanaging you all day, and you're asking me to micromanage your life. Like, bro, I'll bless it. Just get going. And so in that case, I do feel like there are these progressions that we on some level can almost just decide. And to me, that's the gap that I feel like exists.
Well, I think I'm glad you brought that up, because even thinking through my last year on staff at Elevation, part of that journey for me and my wife was just, I was having to look at the things that I was passionate about, the gifts that I felt like the Lord had given me.
Yeah.
And was I stewarding those well in that season? And how did I feel like I was supposed to steward those and use those in the next phase of life?
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, oh, wait, the things I'm actually doing now and what my job has become aren't really in line with the things that I feel like God put in me. And so, yes, I can keep doing this, but in some level, I feel like I'm no longer managing what's been entrusted to me well. And so it was about what I felt like I needed to step into. But then at the same time, I've told the story before, but I really felt like I had an encounter with God on an Elevation Nights tour after months and months and months of praying through this and just feeling like the Lord said, okay, your assignment's done. I've got something else for you to do. But then I've got somebody else who needs to come in and take this where you can't take it anymore.
Right.
And if I'd stayed, I would have been a lid on the next thing that God wanted to do through somebody else.
Yeah.
And so realizing your graduation and your journey is not just about you.
That's right.
It's about the space that you're taking up that somebody else needs to step into so they can grow and they can develop.
That's right.
But all of those conversations and prayers and just late night talks with my wife, a lot of those were trying to define purpose beyond just the cliche way that we use it. Yes, I know there's the general purpose that we all have as believers, and you can live out your purpose in any kind of situation, a job you love or a job you hate. But then okay, God, what have you given me to do? And I know I can work that out in multiple different places, but where can I work it out the best right now?
Right.
And I think those are just really honest, tactical conversations you need to have. Get really detailed about it. Yeah. Process it with people that know, you're so good at seeing patterns in me. And even just, you were the person, you were in town and we hung out a couple months ago, and you were encouraging me to really lean into the thing that was most fun for me. And you said, hey, I know you do a lot and those are all good things, but I think the podcast is the thing I see you having the most fun with. Lean into that.
Yeah.
And you were able to see something in me that I was too close to see. So I think that's where having somebody who can almost be your sounding board, a mentor that you can trust, can really help you see the things that are your blind spots.
Man, I totally agree with that. I was just going to echo that. Again, I'm not looking for people to agree with me. I'm looking to somebody who's going to speak life into me. And I don't mean that in a weird dad way. You and I are the same age. So it doesn't always have to be somebody old. But man, I feel like on some level you can just put a sort of tag on somebody that says, I'm gonna hear and discern. I'm gonna hear and receive their voice more in a mentor pattern than a friend trying to affirm me pattern, kind of way. So I love that. Back to the fun thing. I ask that a lot too. Are you having fun anymore? Because it's funny. People think fun is the opposite of purpose. Fun is the opposite of hard. And I don't think that's the case. I mean, I'm a huge NFL fan. I was watching some of the highlights or lowlights this morning from the game last night. And man, I feel like NFL athletes, and this is true, I guess, for any high level, elite level, role, industry, whatever, you're doing hard things. Even in the military, these guys at the elite level, they're doing terrifyingly difficult things, terrifyingly difficult decisions they have to make. But somehow it is still fun. It is life-giving. It's fulfilling. And so I don't want to gloss over the fact that that's a huge question I feel like more people need to ask. And again, it's not in the Bible. It's not like the 11th commandment. It's not one of the fruits of the Spirit. So people don't think about fun as something that can be a valid part of the church spiritual purpose conversations, And man, but are you having fun? Because your smile is no longer there. Your pace is slowed down because everything that's fun goes fast. We know that, right? Time flies when you're having fun. And, you can tell when their step starts to slow a little bit. You're like, I don't think you're having fun anymore. So just going back to the previous conversation we were just having, that's a variable I think a lot of people should should include too. Even just ask your wife or your husband, like, hey, listen, does it even look like I'm having fun anymore? Start there. That'll answer a lot of questions for you, I think.
Where are you having the most fun right now?
Man, I love talking to, and this has been true forever. I love talking to, helping, seeing people win, the people who are the underdogs, the overlooked, the people who even in themselves. I'm not trying to like do social work or something and go find just the most beat up person ever. I'm not good at that. But when I see somebody who's like, man, you got something in you, let me just throw you the ball a different way. Let me just put you in a different position. That is so fun for me. So actually, and it sounds, I don't know if that sounds funny or not, but it sounds fun. It's fun for me to put somebody in a position, they win, and then I can just sit back and be like, that's cool. I like watching that dude do it. I told him to do. And half the time they won't give me credit for it. So it's not that. It's like, but I know. And it's similar to raising my son. Again, he's 10, my daughter's 13. It's when I see them do certain things, it's like, that's funny. I know where you got that from. That's really good. And that's real fun. It's just fun for me. Mm-hmm. It legitimately is fun to watch other people win. Now, that's clients for me, although that's not always true for every client. Some clients just really enjoy making their own life hard, which makes my life hard. All my current clients are so great. But that's also why I don't take every client, by the way. So it's them, it's friends. That kind of stuff is fun. And so the fun activity in that, because that's obviously seeing the fruit. The fun activity in that is just a lot of this, just a whole lot of like open-ended verbal processing with people and seeing something kind of click. And so I just like the exploration through conversation that leads people to an eye-opening experience. They're like, okay, hang on, I'll try that. And that exploration is a lot of fun for me.
Yeah. It also reminds me, because I feel like your ability to kind of pass somebody the ball and watch them succeed also can come back to you in other ways. You did a post on your Substack or a series of posts on the easiest money you'll ever make.
It's my favorite post, man.
Talk about that.
You and I get a kick out of this. I get a kick out of you getting a kick out of this. And you always text me like, I'm not surprised. So, I mean,
let me just say that I'll frame it like this.
Okay.
You get more random people sending you money than anybody I've ever met. You'll send me, hey, just so-and-so, just cash out to me $500. And that is a regular text that you send me to where it is laughable now.
It is funny.
So explain how that happens.
And so that is the easiest money I've ever made. If somebody just texts you Apple Cash, 500, that same person sent me 1,000 a month before that. There's no good reason for this person to have done that. I wouldn't say that they're beyond wealthy, but it's funny. That happens a lot more than you might think. And matter of fact, those who are listening to this, you go read this post on Substack, actually write down, there's dollar amounts and little quotes that they put on Cash App or something. So it's not just, I'm just throwing out like some one-time thing. People do randomly send me cash or other random stuff. Hey, please use the beach house. It's totally fine. I normally get 4,000 for it, but why don't you just take it? Stuff like that. I just barely alluded to this earlier. We were talking about flying. I had 2 different people in the past give me airplanes. They're each $1 million airplanes. And I say give me. I had unlimited use of them for 3 straight years. So on my last kind of half of my tenure there at Elevation, I flew from Toronto to Orlando on my own whenever I wanted to. Took the family with me. Wait, did you ever fly with me, by the way? Did we ever talk about this?
Nope. Dang. Never have.
No, neither you or Chunks did. I got Josh in there a few times. But anyway, we fly all the time. So that was just like, wait, somebody just gave you a plane? Yeah. And $1,000 Bose headset to go with it. So it's pretty common. And so a couple things stick out though. Number one, I'm not saying it's a one-to-one. You can't do what I do and automatically receive what I receive. Surely you know enough of the Bible to know that's just not how God works. That's the same. Hey, with you tithe $10, God will give you $10 back. That's what preacher man's telling me on stage half the time. That is not how it works. Okay, give and it will be given to you. Look, this person's arm grew back because they gave it the year-end offering. Like, no, it's not exactly how it works. So I'm not saying that. I'm not advocating for that. I do think, though, God's economy is unique in a way where when you put out in faith to serve and build up other people, whether that be tithing, obviously, giving above and beyond your tithe, just selflessly serving others. I'm not talking Mother Teresa vibe either. I'm just saying, hey, put your best self out there in the direction of making other people better. Just aim in somebody else's direction. If you can just do that, the way God's economy works is he'll bring back to you the same mindset, the same sort of idea, maybe, but in a different expression. So go with me here, not you, Wade, you understand it, but listener here, viewer here. I'm not trying to make this come across in a weird, arrogant way, but I'm a pretty wise person. That's a spiritual gift of mine. I can give practical wisdom. Spiritual gift of wisdom in the Bible, I feel like, is the most accurately translated as common sense, which we all know is uncommon these days. So I'm pretty good at that. That's my currency that I can put out into the atmosphere. What other people bring back to me in this case is, funny enough, cash. But what those people evidently don't need cash, but they need wisdom. And so I've just been good at defining for myself, hey, this is what I'm good at. I don't say, hey, I'll give you wisdom if you pay. I do consulting and coaching, and on that case, yeah, I do say that. but I also offer a crap ton, I think is the official language, a crap ton of free wisdom on Instagram. When people send me a DM, I actually respond to it. If you send me a text, I'll respond to it. And I put into the economy wisdom, among other things, because we all have a lot of things we can offer, I'm saying. And then people send me back, in this case, money. Now, that's because God knows that my number one fear is that certainty and security of income. Even when I was on staff at a church, that was always my number one thing. It's like, man, I'm trying to trust you, God, but I was on food stamps, and now I got to take my wife down to the hood and get formula for our newborn. So, and I'm just got this like, oh, it's so embarrassing. It's so frustrating, but it's not like we're living on anything. I mean, like, we're not, extravagant by any stretch. I got my dead grandmother's car. It just broke yesterday in the Target parking lot in Matthews, by the way. That was a whole real scenario. I'm like, what the heck am I going to do? And I feel like God sees that. It's like, yeah, that's fine. You keep putting out what I need you to produce, and I'll have somebody else pay the bill from what they can produce. And I'm just saying, in my case, that tends to be money. Other people, you're going to receive a ton of encouragement that you never got from your mom or dad or your spouse. Some of you are going to receive experiences that you never would have gotten any other place, and you're going to receive an experience. I feel like another one is access. That's what I try to provide to a lot of people's access, especially when I was at Elevation. I had unique access to people and places and a really great credit limit on the credit card. I could provide access to a church planner who otherwise was never going to be able to do something. And so just know God will pay you back, very much in quotes, in a unique way that you actually need. But it might not always be what you expect or what you want. But I will say it's always going to be worth it. And so it's just, I would just argue, please study God's economy a little bit more. It's a real thing. And so, yeah, I get a lot of free money.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that specific swebb anointing in my life as well.
It's coming, man. Touch your hand on the screen.
I receive it. Yeah, and I would encourage everybody who's watching or listening to check out your Substack, because everything we've talked about today, whether it's when to graduate or how to connect people that in a way that blesses them, but like you said, comes back and blesses you as well. Like, there's some very practical steps you lay out on your Substack, or as you call it, Swebstack. So I'll link all that in the show notes as well. It's probably the best. You leverage Substack as a coaching tool in a way that I haven't seen anybody else do. And so I think it's a really, really great, super inexpensive resource for people.
That's good.
Before we get to, we have a new final segment that you actually helped me brainstorm. So we're going to get to that in a second.
Let's go.
But that's only for my Substack paid subscribers. So we'll get to that in a second.
That's good. Mm-hmm.
But to kind of land the plane for the regular part of this conversation, can you help delineate the difference between calling and employment? Because I wanted to make sure we talk about that to help kind of bookend this whole graduation conversation, because I think so many people have conflated the two. Yeah. And they're very different.
Yeah. Well, man, I'm not a seminary professor, so I'll give you my layman version of this, but let me say a sticky statement first to set that up is I've kind of had this provocative punch in the face I give people, not individually usually, but like in mass, like social media. It says, if you need your compensation and your calling to line up, then God will hang up that phone and call somebody else. And so I feel like that's a reality that people need to understand. And if you've lived on the planet longer, 25, 30 years, you kind of have seen this. You just have forgotten about it, or you've blocked it out because now you're like, no, I'm in this position now. This is my calling because my income matches it. Like, I don't, man, what Bible verse are you reading to get that philosophy of ministry and philosophy of life and fulfillment or whatnot? So the easiest way for me to do the calling part is simply just to remove from the equation the employment part. would you continue to do this if you weren't paid to do it? Well, I just feel like no, that's not what I'm asking. If you were not paid to do this, which, yeah, I totally would. Have you done it? Well, what did you do right before you got the job? Well, and if you can't say it, then I'm not calling you out as a mean person who's not doing it, not living in God's will. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you got a little bit more work to do to define for yourself what your actual calling is. And so to me, it's just the easier part of the equation to remove the income and then see what's left, how pure that is. Do we need to keep refining by pulling income out? And income, by the way, is the word we're using now, salary, dollar amount. But would you do what you do if you lived in a town half this size? Would you do what you do if you lived in the north or you lived in the south? Would you do what you do if you had to move to another country to do the exact same thing? And I'm not talking about third world. I got back from Taipei, Taiwan, 2 days ago. It is my favorite international city, very modern, has all the stuff we have here. But what I do if God said to move to Taipei. You see what I'm saying? It's like, I feel like that's the issue, is remove the compensation, all the circumstantial stuff from it. And then what's left, we'll know, or you'll know. And so that's how I view getting to that point. I don't have the Bible verse in my head, at least not right now. I'm sure you can remind me. But of like, well, here's what Scripture says about calling. I'm more coming at it from the practical side of taking the distraction away from it, and if you'll still do it. Now, for me, I've done that multiple times. I have worked and done what I did for free beforehand and after. Like we were just talking about this a minute ago, I graduated without any clue whatsoever. I actually said, no, I don't want to consult. No, I don't want to coach. At one point, I had people try to buy me out and say, well, we're going to send you out to be a coach and consultant. Here's $250,000. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. So I'm actually aggressively pushing against the circumstantial income stuff. But it's funny enough, long story short, I guess I'm doing what I'm called to do now. So I've proven it. Another example, I've been on top of the org chart, as high as I could ever go with the org chart, and I purposely put myself under it because I always felt, man, I need to continue to push people up. And so circumstantially, my salary was whatever. But circumstantially, I still, I had to give up that idea of, power and authority or whatnot. Now, that was my decision. I was not fired or demoted in any way. It actually freaked everybody out when I volunteered to do that. That was a whole fun conversation. So I'm just saying, I've done that in a few places. I don't know what your example is, Mrs. Viewer, but you have to remove those circumstantial kind of comfort preference-based things. And then that'll bring a whole lot more clarity to whatever you're calling. And now the fun starts at that point.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that a regular salary or income can be addicting, but what you just said there is so true, that a certain level of status or influence or an association with the place, that can be very addicting as well.
Oh, huge.
And it can be very hard to walk away from because you have wrapped up your identity with the thing that you're a part of.
Yeah. And I might argue that might be a bigger one. That might be bigger than the income thing for most people. Yeah.
It was for me. That was, totally the income piece was a big thing too, because I had that need for certainty as well.
Sure.
But yeah, it took me a long time to be able to uncouple Wade, the worship pastor from Elevation, to just Wade. Like God loves me because of who I am, and I can make a difference and bring something good into the world if I'm attached to something big or not. And that was something I had to come to terms with on one level before I left. Yeah. And it's something I've had to continue to come to terms with in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And I think we don't realize how much that gets into our heart to be associated with something great, and how that can pacify you and make you afraid to step out and be obedient and be bold.
And that's also what makes you tremendously valuable to the people you talk to, is because now you've seen it, lived through it. It's like you got the antibodies now. Because I get so many, as you can imagine, hey, what did you do at Elevation? Not you as in me, but it's like Swebb, but what did y'all do about this system, this process? Or I'm like, listen, that's the wrong question. Or when people start to posture, hey, Swebb, we want to pay you thousands of dollars to come in and teach us. But then you get there and it's all about, hey, tell me what Pastor Stephen Furtick's bicep routine was. It's the weirdest crap that people ask. And I'm over here and it's funny that that's a real question people have asked for. And what's his house really look like? I'm like, man, he's a great man and just a real good dude. What are we talking about, And so, but having that sort of antibodies, if you will, hey, been there, done that, and kind of being able to say, let me show you how there's here's the great question you're really trying to ask. And so I know that sounds really silly. And I know that's not applicable to everybody because not everybody was at, celebrity church, big church, whatever. But I have found that to be tremendously helpful for me too, to kind of bring me back to like, hey, that's not the pinnacle. It's phenomenal. I still advocate for them all day, every day. I'm just saying that is not the pinnacle. There's this thing over here. So that's actually been really fun and helpful too. Cause then people go, oh, I didn't know. I thought because of the X, Y, and Z, then we had to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah. Like, no, there's something greater in you. I know you've done this before too. So I actually think that's just a bonus blessing that I really do appreciate about my time at Elevation, among other places too, where you've seen things other people haven't seen, done things other people haven't done, have numbers in your phone that people don't have. And instead of being like, yeah, I'm awesome, it's more like, hey, let me just show you how you can actually do 10 times that. And then people, it opens their eyes like, oh, of all people, at least Swebb has the ability to say that. I mean, it's credibility. And to me, that's a far bigger win. So that's how you ninja move that.
I mean, the question I get asked all the time is, what is Swebb's bicep routine? So maybe
I get it. Yeah, I'll post that. It's a paid level Substack post.
Paid level? Okay, good. Once again, just go to the Swebstack to get that. Swebb, where can people, we talked about the Substack, but where can people follow you if they want to work with you one-on-one? What's the next step for all that? Since your gift is wisdom, how can people get more of this wisdom?
Yes, wisdom at swebb.fyi. No, but I need to make that website or that email now. The easiest way is, you can hit me up any way you can find me. I like to push everybody to Instagram first. Stephen P. Webb. I know it should be Swebb, but it's Stephen P. Webb. We'll tag that somewhere. Find me there. Most of you have already found me there. Swebb.fyi is the website. Swebb.fyi.substack.com is where I put all that Substack stuff. Those three places are fine. I have forums as well. You can find me, but at the end of the day, however you get in touch with me, I'll respond. That's one of the more helpful and obnoxious things about me is I'm ridiculously responsive. So you'll find me, you'll hit me up, and we'll work together. One-on-one coaching. I'll come visit your church for a couple of days. You can actually come here for half the price if you want to come to Austin. I host church planners here all the time. So we'll find a way to make it work. You find me, I'll respond to you though.
Yes, I can vouch for his responsiveness. All right, so this is the part where just our regular listeners, we're going to land the plane for them. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Yeah. But if you want to stay, we're about to introduce a new segment. And I think I was brainstorming this with you, Swebb, yesterday, and you helped me name it. It's going to be called State Your Piece, where we're going to ask.
I love that you landed on that.
I do. I like it. Good. I'm going to ask every guest, at least for the foreseeable future. I don't know how long this will last. It's in the workshop phase. But I want to ask what the best piece of advice you've ever received is, but then also, because we mentioned today, not everybody likes to actually put advice into practice. Mm-hmm. Then what did you do with that advice? So if you want to hear Swebb's answer, you can go over and become a paid subscriber of the Joyful Leader Substack. That's a way you can help support this podcast. It's just $8 a month. And I'll be posting these bonus segments from the podcast over there. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Now it's time to hear your answer, Swebb, for State Your Piece.